Hello, I'm Rico Hill, the host of From Sickness to Health. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm standing next to an obviously blue guy. Well, let me explain. You see, blue is often considered the color of sadness or even sickness. You know, feeling blue? Well, that's who he is. He's the blue guy.
Sickness, that's me.
Now, whatever he says and whatever he does is all to make you sick.
And whatever he says is going to take away your favorite food, so don't listen to him.
This is a health program that shares helpful tips that come from science and the Bible.
Or as some of us like to say, a bunch of restrictions.
Today's topic is the dangers of drinking milk, cow's milk. Now, here's a tip. He's going to try to convince you that milk does a body good.
Does my body good.
Well, maybe that's why you're blue.
Something wrong with the color blue?
Look, I'm not going to get into this with you. Let's roll the program.
Is it because I'm blue? What, really? You're just going to roll the program just like that?
Look.
Blue power!
Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us here in the studio. I'm Rico Hill, and you're probably wondering, who am I? Well, I'm the guy who wants to see you healthy. And I want to share information with you that will help you to be healthy and to live a long and quality life. And what I do is I bring in doctors who come and share good science and good research with us that will help you to be healthy. Now, today I'm joined by Dr. Jim Saeed. And Dr. Jim Saeed is a board-certified chiropractor and a naturopathic doctor. And the thing I like about Jim is that he not only blesses people and helps them to overcome and reverse lifestyle diseases, but he actually educates people about how to prevent disease and sickness. So, welcome, Dr. Jim Saeed.
Thank you so much.
Now, we have a fascinating topic today. We're going to talk about the dangers of drinking milk. But of course, we just heard that it does a body good and it's okay to drink milk. But we're going to hear different, right?
Absolutely.
Before we start our discussion, we'd like to give, as always, our friend Sickness an opportunity to share his point of view. So with that, let's join Sickness. He's on location making himself a milkshake, I think. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Rico. Hey, Doc. So what I'm doing here is making a delicious, fantastic, fantabulous milkshake. And who doesn't love a good milkshake? You know, it's all American, which is wonderful. It's got 2 creamy scoops of ice cream, some vitamin D milk. I'm gonna get my milk mustache on in a sec. It's good for your bones, it's enriched with vitamins. And hey, babies love milk, and I do too. Nothing better than a good old-fashioned American milkshake. Back to you, Rico.
We've heard everything now, haven't we? So a milkshake is American. Is that true?
So they say.
So how do you feel about this whole idea that it's un-American to not drink a milkshake or drink milk? Let's break this whole thing down because there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about milk. Would you say so?
Absolutely.
So let's begin to share with the audience some of your, you deal with this all the time. You deal with patients who come in, they've got allergies, they've got diabetes. We're seeing type 1 diabetes more in young children, juvenile onset diabetes. Talk to us a little bit about milk and is it really good for the body?
You bring up several points that are really extremely important. First of all, milk does a body good until about the age of 2 to 3. That's the problem. milk is designed for a baby. And every mammal nurses its young until they wean, and then they never go back to the breast. They never continue nursing. Also, ordinarily, no mammal ever nurses from another species. And the reason is simple. Milk of every mother for that animal contains what it requires for that animal to grow and double its size in a certain amount of time.
Now hold on, I'm going to just jump in for a second because I
Yeah.
want to really unpack that some more. But a lot of people out there are listening, they're watching, and they're thinking, wait a minute, I saw this amazing campaign of Got Milk, and we saw all of these celebrities with milk mustaches, you know some of them, and not personally, but you know of some of them. And we saw this campaign where they were pushing. Milk does a body good. Do you have milk? So, I mean, is that, people are thinking, is that true? Is that, were they lying to us? What do we make of that?
That's a good question. It's true partly and untrue in a major way. It is true for the child. I'll give you an example, a simple example. A mother's milk for a human is very low protein. In fact, the lowest of any mammal virtually. And it's designed to let that infant grow to double its size in about 120 days, about 4 months. A cow has about 3 times the protein that a mother's milk has, and that calf grows in about 45 days to double its weight. Now, if you want very high protein milk, a rat has about 20% protein, so does a blue whale. But I don't think
that's a little hard for me to just process, a rat's milk.
Rat's milk it's not a growth industry. but that's high protein.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, I was going to jump in and just ask the question because, or make the comment, because you're making a very good point in that when we see an animal, say in the wild, there's a reason why that animal or that calf needs to double its weight very quickly.
Survival.
For survival.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, continue.
So our milk has not just protein, but also fats and sugars and antibodies and nutrients of all kinds and immune system components to strengthen that baby as the baby is nursing. Now, after about the age of 2, the baby starts losing certain enzymes to digest that milk. So now the milk is not only not digested, but the constituents in the milk that aren't digested become actively antagonistic to the body. So after the age of weaning, it no longer does a body good.
Ah, so what you're saying that it's only a half-truth.
Yes.
Yes, it does a body good. We put it into perspective here for you. It does a body good up to a certain point, and then that child needs to be weaned from the milk.
Yes.
Ah, okay, I see. Continue.
Now, if the child takes from another animal, like a cow as a wet nurse, then that child is getting in all the hormones, the fats, the sugars, the proteins intended for a calf. The problem is it's not designed for us. And in my practice, I see serious downsides with this on a daily basis.
Why don't you share with us some of the downsides? Let's look at those.
Happily.
Okay.
One of the most common symptoms I find in milk drinkers after weaning is symptoms that I call wet. Wet symptoms like sinusitis, post-nasal drip,
running nose,
mucus generating symptoms, including, by the way, in the gut. Many people's bowel function is terribly distorted by taking in dairy. Constipation or diarrhea is an example. But also what I find in about 98% of my patient load, because we test for allergies, we test for hypersensitivities, is they have a hypersensitive reaction to the dairy protein. And they can't digest it effectively.
So what percentage of the American population, or even the world population for that matter, is what we would call lactose intolerant?
All right, those are 2 separate issues.
Okay.
Lactose intolerance is in about 70% of the population. Most of the world except for Central European and Northern European. but the rest of the world generally is lactose intolerant. But virtually all the world is casein intolerant.
Ah, now what is casein? Let's explain to the audience what is this word casein?
Yeah, this is important. Casein is the dairy protein. That's why I emphasize the little amount of protein in mother's milk and the greater amount of protein, for example, in cow or sheep or goat milk or camel milk.
Mm-hmm.
The protein is the issue. So when we take in that protein and we can't fully digest it, that protein doesn't get fully broken down into its amino acids, the basic building blocks of protein.
Mm-hmm.
And digestion requires that that protein is broken down to its smallest molecule so we can take it across the gut wall and use it to build our bodies. If, however, that protein is not all the way broken down,
What happens to it?
Now the immune system sees it as a foreign protein, like it would see a virus or a bacterium, for example. And the immune system now attacks that protein to get it out of the system. One of the ways it attacks it is by generating histamine. And the gut cells have...
What is histamine?
I'll explain.
Okay.
We have in our gut certain cells that make histamine that when we get a foreign protein, histamine bursts and it causes the reaction of mucus to be produced from the cells that create mucus in the gut. So mucus starts to flow. The reason is the body wants to wash out that invading protein. And that's its first route of response. Get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we start developing wet symptoms from the mucus production. Also, an immunoglobulin, as it's called, the kind of chemistry that the body creates, tags that protein and locks onto it to attract other parts of the immune system to destroy it. It's called an immune reaction.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because
Yes.
my understanding is that this is connected to type 1 diabetes in a lot of the children where their pancreas is unable to produce insulin because it has been attacked by an autoimmune type of situation. Is that connected to that?
That's exactly, I'm glad you bring that up. It is precisely connected to it in this way. When we react to that undigested protein and these immunoglobulins attached to that protein, they then start to surveil through the rest of the body, circulating through the blood, to attack similar kinds of proteins, to attach to them, to neutralize them and get them out of the body.
Okay.
The difficulty is when one of our own tissues looks like that same protein, as for example, certain cells in the pancreas, the islets of Langerhans they're called, look like the casein structure.
Wow.
And now the immune system says, oh, you must be just like casein, I'm going to attack you also. It turns out that 100% of type 1 diabetics, juvenile onset diabetics, are casein intolerant, 100%. And when you measure their casein intolerance, it's extremely high.
Let's make this very, very practical. So what we're saying is that when the mom at home is thinking under the understanding that she's doing something very good for her child,
right,
and giving him or her a glass of milk, she's actually putting his or her body under attack.
Yes, and causing a stress to the gut, creating inflammation in the gut, now affecting not just the digestion of the casein of the milk, but also other proteins from other foods as well.
Some may be just sort of writing off this whole idea of type 1 diabetes. Okay, we've heard about it, but this is very serious, isn't it? Because once the pancreas is no longer producing insulin, you have to do what for the rest of your life?
Take insulin injections. Now, there's more to it than this. People that don't contend with type 1 diabetes or juvenile onset diabetes are still having to deal with the consequence, the downside of drinking milk or cheese or yogurt or even butter for that matter, any form of dairy, because that protein is still taken into the body and our bodies still don't tolerate it. Maybe not to the extent of attacking the pancreas, but it does attack other tissues in terms of creating an inflammatory response, including the brain.
Including the brain?
Yes.
Now, I know some people are out there wondering, they're thinking, now, who is this affecting mostly in terms of ethnicity? What's the demographic breakdown? Who is this affecting the most?
Everybody.
Everybody?
Yes, the casein is affecting everybody. The
Do we see a higher incidence in some? I hear that this is more prevalent within the African American communities, amongst Asians. What's your research say?
You're referring to the lactose, which is the milk sugar. And yes, the African community, the Asian community, all communities except for that Central and Northern European community tend to react poorly to lactose. And everybody reacts poorly to casein.
Everyone?
Yes.
That's across the board?
Across the board.
So if we're talking about, is there some country that consumes large amounts of dairy? What do we see amongst those groups?
Oh, that's a great question. We see that, for example, especially in Northern European cultures, where they consume a large quantity of dairy, milk, cheese, etc. They also tend to have the highest incidence of fractures and osteoporosis, or demineralization of the bone. And
so that's the breaking down of the bones, the weakening of the bones.
Yes, and here's why. When we drink milk or take in cheese, for example, the reaction the body has is an acid kind of reaction. The body then has to neutralize that acid because the blood wants to be slightly alkaline. And the body has very definite and tiered or three-leveled controls of keeping the body at a very finely tuned pH, slightly alkaline. When we take in that acid food, one of those mechanisms is releasing a slightly alkalinizing effect called calcium. And the greatest reserve of that calcium is from our bones.
Yeah.
So the body starts leaching calcium from the bone to alkalinize the acidity from the dairy, weakening the bone structure.
Wait a minute, doctor. You just caused people's heads to explode.
I know.
Their heads have just exploded. Why? Because people are being told, drink your milk for strong bones and teeth. Isn't that what people are saying? Vitamin D, that vitamin is supposed to sort of shore up our bones and our teeth.
Exactly.
So
the problem is the demographics. The people for whom that ad is appropriate are under 2. Above that, it's not a true statement.
So it's doing the opposite. It's actually causing the bones to become weakened and brittle and...
Yes.
Well, you know what? Speaking of the demographics, we should probably check in with Sickness because we sent him out onto the streets to talk to those who love their milk, who basically want to drink milkshakes just like him, right? So let's see what they have to say.
All right. So, ladies, tell me your name.
Rosie.
Rosie.
Riley.
And Riley. I would have preferred your hair to be blue, but that's okay. That's okay. And now let me ask you, ladies. Do you drink milk?
I love milk.
Love milk?
I
love you. How about you?
Only at night.
Only at night. Why at night?
Because that's the only time I eat cereal.
Ah, so cereal with your milk. Yeah. That's why it tastes so good. Cereal on milk and milk on cereal. You like milk, don't you?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
I like it in
my
ice
man.
cream.
And ice cream.
Yeah.
Forget the regular stuff. Just go straight to the cold goodness.
Yeah, why not?
Man, me and Kyle, we're buddies here. This is fantastic. Hey, let me ask you. You like milk?
Lactose intolerant. I'm tough for you today.
This guy is quitting on everything. Why'd you become lactose intolerant? What made your decision to do that?
A bunch of mucus, always coughing up stuff, getting stomach cramps and stuff like that.
No, but what made you stop drinking milk? All that stuff sounds good.
My parents, in a way.
Oh, they made you, yeah. He was forced.
I wasn't forced. And naturally, my body said no, and I didn't like the way I felt when I drank milk. So now I drink almond milk, and I'm fine.
Are you one of those health nuts?
I am.
Oh, man. Did you just say you drink almond milk?
Almond milk, rice milk, hemp milk.
Oh, man, this is like that nut milk stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That
nutty.
stuff is nasty.
Nutty.
Oh, man, you're one of the health nuts.
Yes,
Who wants to drink milk from a nut, buddy? This interview is done. You can go down the street, Damien, find you a tree, and get some milk from a nut. Out of here. Give me somebody else.
Peace.
This many people can't be wrong. Back to you guys in the studio. I'm gonna find me a milkshake with some creamy ice cream, some vitamin D milk. Where do you find that in this town?
Wow. It's amazing how people are so misled by this whole idea that milk does a body good, isn't it? They love their milk.
Sadly.
And well, you know, I want to read a piece of, or text of scripture that I think is pertinent for the rest of our conversation. And this is found in Isaiah chapter 28, and it begins in verse 9. And it says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast."
Amen.
So God in his word is calling people away from, now we could understand this or think of this as just as it applies to scripture, but it naturally happens in real life where children are weaned from the breast and they are to begin to take on more solid food.
Amen.
So we're trying to give some solid food today, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to throw out a few things, and I want you to just react to them. Asthma.
Here's the difficulty. When we drink milk or cheese, we
Drink milk or eat cheese.
Exactly. We take in that casein. It triggers an immune reaction, not just in the gut, but also in the lungs. There's an immune system tissue that is similar in the lungs as it is in the gut, that is triggered to also generate mucus. The effect of that is going to be colds, flus, and for many cases, asthma itself. So
wow.
Now you have an additional set of issues, and I've seen many, many young patients with asthma and eczema, commonly associated with that, recover fully when they take dairy out of the diet.
Take dairy out of the diet, and one can actually overcome their asthma or even their eczema.
Yes.
Let me throw another one out to you. Now, I don't know if this is true. People probably want to know this because it's, it's bandied about quite a bit. It is said that all types of hormones, steroids, and antibiotics are found in the milk, even blood.
Yes.
Is this true?
As well as pus.
How so?
In the dairy industry, cows are forced to grow rapidly because of economics. Sadly, they're given circumstances that are not conducive to health. So they're pumped full of antibiotics to sustain their immune system artificially because they're in close quarters, they don't want to get sick. They're also pumped full of hormones to force their growth and milk production beyond normal so that they can be milked on a continual basis. The problem is we take those in ourselves, not to mention the naturally occurring hormones in the cow intended for the calf's growth. Now, mother's milk also has hormones, but for humans. It also has antibodies, not antibiotics, but antibodies.
Cow's mother has hormones, but for humans or for their calf?
Only for the calf.
Only for the calf, okay.
Exactly. A human has hormones for the human. Now, one other quick point. When a child suckles the breast, the saliva of the child has a chemistry taken up by the mother's breast that alters the blood of the mother and therefore the milk of the mother to give the child what it needs in that moment, both nutritionally and to support the immune system of that child. We don't get that when we don't nurse, especially from another mammal that's not designed for that.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying here. So you're saying that when a nursing child is drinking from its mother's breast,
Yes.
within its own saliva,
Yes.
there's something that's triggering a signal or some type of chemistry that the mother's milk will respond to keep that baby healthy?
Yes. We can measure in the saliva hormones, nutrients, chemistries of many kinds. It is a fluid generated by the blood.
Wow. So milk doesn't do a body good.
After 2.
After 2,
And from your
it
own
doesn't
mom.
do a body good. Now, we can't just tell people to stop drinking milk, though. Is there anything that people can do? I mean, personally, I like some of the nut milks. Now, people, as Sickness said, is nutty if they drink nut milk. What do you think about that?
I deal with this day in and day out in practice. And we help people transition from a dairy-based diet to a non-dairy diet. And nut milks, for example, are a great idea.
Now, we're talking about what? in terms of nut milks?
For example, simple. Take a handful of cashews, small handful.
Okay.
Toss it in a blender with water, and as my wife says, blend the hookah out of it.
The hookah out of
The
it.
hookah out of it.
All right.
Until there's nothing left that you'd have to crunch.
And it's very creamy once you blend it up with
It's
water.
very creamy. Also, people do the same thing with other kinds of nuts, or even seeds, for example, like sesame seed milk as an example, or coconut milk as another option.
And they're all on the market now, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You can get your coconut milk, you can get your almond milk, soy milk. I have quite the preference for almond milk, and even making it myself, because it's white like milk, and people are probably thinking, what, almonds? Absolutely. You'll have to catch our cooking segment where we show you how to make almond milk. But you're right. You can absolutely take nuts and make your own milk.
Absolutely. I tend to discourage people, however, from soy milk.
Why is that?
Soy is filled with constituents that trigger the building up of hormones, especially estrogen, but it also can block the assimilation of proteins and minerals.
Okay, now.
So I'm careful with soy.
Wow, soy, huh? Well, that is another episode for us to cover. Well, you have been in tune to From Sickness to Health. I'm your host, Rico Hill, and we look forward to seeing you on our next broadcast where you'll learn more. God bless. Well, it's true. There is nothing like a cold glass of milk. I tell you, when I was a kid, I could probably down about 50 cookies with a cold glass of milk. When I found out the issues of milk, I tell you, I felt like my world was going to come to an end. But then I learned about the options that I had, the alternatives. A lot of the soy milks and the nut milks, like almond milk and coconut milk and rice milk, you know, they taste just as good and sometimes even better than the real thing. I personally think they are the real thing. You know what? Why don't you try one of those and see how you feel?
I'll tell you how they feel. Depressed, discouraged, overwhelmed. Who do you think likes to drink milk from a nut?
Millions of people do. And I'll tell you something else. They're reversing their diabetes. They're not catching colds as easily as they used to. They're not having allergies or ear infections. The bloating and gas.
What's wrong with a little gas for the engine? You know what? I'm going to leave this nut milk for you health nuts. Emphasis on nuts.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's better to be a health nut than a sick nut.
Wait a minute. What?
And that's the truth. Now, I'd like to end this program with a quotation from 3 John 2 in the Bible. It says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health." I'm Rico Hill, your host, and this is
Sickness, the blue guy.
Be Healthy. Maranatha.
Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. Oh, anybody, I need a little help. Oh man, anybody, hey, do you know which way the bathroom is? Somebody help me. Hey man, you know which way the bathroom is? I don't got time for this, I need a bathroom. Oh.